Hey, Anthony, hey, Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the brand new Forest Swords album, Compassion. Forest Swords is the musical pseudonym of Mr. Matthew Barnes. This is his second full-length album under the name, following up his surprisingly popular Engravings in 2013. I say surprisingly popular because it's rare that you have a new face sort of explode out of the experimental or ambient electronic music scene, especially since it took him a few years to follow up the EP that sort of put his name on the map in the first place. And on this latest record over here, he's still offering up plenty of stimulating ideas. What's a sophomore slump? This LP is filled to the brim with all these dramatic, textured, meditative, and primal electronic music pieces that fuse acoustics with electronics. They really march to the beat of their own drum. They don't seem to stick directly to any ongoing trends right now happening in electronic music or beat music, ambient music. You can clearly hear the DNA of those things as well as like IDM running through this thing. But Matthew has blended all of that and more with a comprehensive approach to soundcraft, which is made for a pretty dynamic and beautiful album. Not to mention the whole thing rounds out at about 45 minutes, and this thing is just 10 tracks long. So even though Matthew's approach to musical style and sound may be a little experimental, the way he builds these songs out, they're pretty direct. On the song Wore It, we're hit toward the beginning of the track with all of these very drony, epic, what sounds like horn samples or maybe a horn synth patch. All I know is they sound great, and they grow more and more intense as the track progresses, incorporating these cycling, tinny, kind of brittle sound effects that kind of have a rhythmic quality to them. I like them a lot. These panoramic chorus samples come in and make the track feel even more grand. There's kind of a dystopian or apocalyptic tone to the instrumental. Reminds me a little bit of Tim Hecker, except for the fact that these heavy tribal rhythms come into the track, which kind of ends up being a bit of a calling card for Matthew on this album. These are really kind of a staple for the record. I also like the quiet before the storm effect. In the last third of the track, there's a nice, quiet, somber interlude right before the song gives us a big finish. I feel a similar sonic recipe on the song The Highest Flood right afterwards. There's another epic chorus line here. There's some more cerebral rhythms, but this track is played out with a bit of some glitchy piano samples. They're kind of disorienting and sporadic, but the choral line smooths things out. There's just so many things to say about this track and other tracks too, to the point where I feel like I can't talk about all of it. There's just so much detail here. I love how, again, these piano samples are disorienting, but the choral line kind of has this effect where it smooths that out. And this track, in comparison with the intro, is way more direct. The track Panic is equal parts trippy, tribal, epic, and psychedelic, featuring all these twinkling pieces of metallic percussion, these moaning, elongated melodies that sound like they're coming from a string or a reed instrument. I can't quite tell. They're kind of dirtied up, warped in a way where it's hard to tell what the source material is. Is it original? Is it from somewhere else? I really don't know, but that's a part of the magic of this record. There is kind of a bit of a how do you do it factor to these compositions. And there's something about the relaxing, smooth synth keys along with the kind of very busy rhythms on the track Arms Out that reminds me of Fever Ray's album. I could totally see Karen singing over this instrumental had it not been for the male vocal samples that are very beautiful all over the track. Now, the final three tracks on this thing, I think, make for a very strong finish. The track SJURVIVAL is a very eerie interlude, complete with this haunting, moaning lead melody that sounds like if a horn could cry. And the song Raw Language is probably the closest the album comes to either delivering a banger or just being directly aggressive. There are all sorts of driving hand claps on this thing, very decisive string melodies, and a fat, round bass line that I love. There are numerous phases to the track too, and it gets especially powerful as the densely layered vocal passages, which are deliciously chopped up and sampled, fly in. Which again is one of many vocal passages, many choral vocal passages on the album that feel like they have kind of a tribal tone to them, or like they're almost almost coming from a record of chants or something, but this one is easily the best and grandest of them all. Matthew really saved the best for last on this thing. Plus the saxophone interlude on this track, not expected and nice touch. The song Knife Edge is a beautifully strange piano piece that I think finishes the album off really well. It's a nice lighter touch on the album without falling prey to so many of the usual cliches that typically come into play whenever an artist takes a more subtle approach with the final track on an album. Now, I do have a few reservations about this record. As experimental and I think as unique as Matthew's sound is on this album, the more I listened to it, the more apparent it became there was really a formula to how he sort of built out the rhythms, the vocal samples, the synths, what synth patches he chose on this album. Given just how colorful and creative what he brought to the table was on this record, I think he really could have done just a bit more to add a touch extra of variety to the album, just to give the record just a bit more depth and breadth. And while I don't mind an interlude, especially on an album of this style, the song Border Margin Barrier just felt like an interlude that went on way too long, or maybe a track that wasn't fully fleshed out or complete. And Vandalism was one of the few moments on the album where I felt kind of disappointed by the structure of a track. Suddenly, the rhythms and much of what was making the song interesting from the introduction sort of breaks away for this elongated horn interlude that I think really kills the momentum of the track, doesn't really feel like it has a strong sense of direction, and the song never really recovers from this point, in my opinion. Regardless, I still thought this was a very great and very solid record. A lot of interesting elements, again, of IDM and ambient music, of dub. Again, so many things going into the recipe of this record. Especially loved Matthew's approach to sampling on this thing, the sequencing of the rhythms, the synths on this thing. I'm just enamored with so many elements of this record. The sound of this thing was great, and it's easily going to be one of my favorite electronic releases of the year. I'm feeling a light to decent 8. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Just leave an angry comment in the comments if you're angry. Forest Swords, Compassion, check the album out. Other videos next to my head I think you should check out. Subscribe to the channel, official website too. Stay hydrated and get some sleep forever.